The Pontiffs Anonymous podcast network is sponsored by McKelvey Insurance Group. If you've ever felt confused or overwhelmed by insurance, McKelvey Insurance Group keeps it simple. They're an independent agency, which means they compare options from multiple providers to find coverage that actually fits you, not just one provider's policy. There's no pressure and no jargon, just honest guidance and real help. Call Evan McKelvey at 618-623-0080 or reach out to us at Pontiffs Anonymous and we'd be happy to connect the dots. They will save you money and they'll save it for you in less than 24 hours. Call Evan. This episode of Needed to Hear That is brought to you by LightSource. What do we need when we're in the dark? Sometimes it's simply just a light source.
What is up, Chazzy? Here we are. I don't even know what number we're on anymore.
We should stop doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it.
Season
1.
There you go. I like it. How are you feeling?
I'm all right.
We're going to talk about stories tonight.
Yeah. I'm feeling grateful.
Yeah. You got a little fender bender yesterday. Happy Easter.
Yeah. Happy Easter to everybody. It's the Monday after Easter.
He's risen.
He is risen. Yeah, we got in a really bad car wreck.
You and your wife.
Yesterday, Holly and I got in a bad car wreck. We were not at fault.
No.
Which is a bit of an understatement.
I call it a felony hit and run.
Yeah, it seems to be. It would probably be a felony hit and run were there someone to be charged.
Sure.
But we got.
They literally ran.
Yeah, somebody that seemed to possibly, allegedly, be maybe impaired in their driving, cut across a lane and hit us on the driver's side really hard and clean and spun us out. And I think some of the designs on our vehicle probably kept us from flipping over. And we are both okay.
Airbags got you.
Yeah, big time. And so, I have some...
Had Holly
burns and
needed the airbag, it would have been there.
Yeah, it would have been there too. Yeah. It's I mean, as stories go, it's one that will kind of stick with you as like more, we've had more time to think about it, and then details come out, and then you remember this and remember that. And
it's funny, but not funny that we were talking last night. So you were on your way to my house for some little salt and smoke.
Yeah.
And some mac and cheese, best mac and cheese.
All I had on my mind.
And I get home with the salt smoke, and Ashley's on the phone with Holly. And when we're talking on the phone these days, it's
yes, a phone call is very serious.
It's kind of stops even me in my tracks, and I can hear Holly's a little frantic, and Ashley's now frantic, and I look on her face. And she says, "Do you need us to come?" And I could hear Holly say, "No, it's okay. The cops are coming. Let me call you back." And Ashley hung up, and she looked at me. She goes, "I got in a bad car accident." And I was like, "This is you don't ask for permission,
right?
You beg for forgiveness." I go, "I'm headed that way." And luckily, Holly and Ashley track each other's phones, as healthy friends do. And
we were very lucky.
And I was able to locate you in East St. Louis and come up onto the scene of the crime, and your car was mangled, and as was the other car.
Yeah.
And the two cops that were combing through the other car came out and said, "Yeah, there's a lot of empties in there.
A lot of open containers in there.
Banana flavored shooters."
Yeah, and I recently, I believe, in a text message to Haley, referred to you as more of a forgiveness than permission,
right?
Kind of person.
Just before or after the accident?
This is a few days ago.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of. You were not the only person to run up on the scene of the crime. There seemed to be a lot of people that kind of wandered along and asked what was going on. Somebody asked what our insurance situation was, which was nice of him. Salesman at his best.
Wasn't Evan, was it?
No, I don't believe so. I'd be surprised if he didn't introduce himself. But
what I was going to say that's funny and sad, because it's a car. You guys are okay. But fuck, you get attached to a car. A lot of memories in a.
We love that. We've taken a lot of trips in that car, and that car is kind of why we've decided that we'll drive anywhere. We've been on some long road trips because
I've gone on some rides with you.
Actually, we can do anything in the
Charlie.
We love it. Yeah, we love it, and so it immediately, not to anthropomorphize, not to make it a
big word,
a
right
living
there.
thing, but the car definitely saved our life. The design of that vehicle definitely saved our life for sure.
The thoroughfare that you were on is not just a 25-mile-an-hour school zone. I mean, it's anything more that if it wasn't the train tracks, it'd been a highway.
Yeah,
in fact, if it were a highway, Belleville would be O'Fallon right now.
Yeah,
they tried to make it 15 that highway.
Recommended set of speeds.
Yeah,
maybe, but
sure.
Yeah, it was. It's the. Anybody that knows me knows that I've never, for all the talk that we do on here about addiction, I've said on here before, I don't drink and I don't do drugs, and I've never had a drink and I've never done a drug. And so that means that I have been hit and ran by 2 intoxicated drivers in my life, but had 0 drinks in my life.
That's a short end of the stick, my friend.
My intersection with alcohol has mostly been negative in that regard, but
I appreciate you more today than yesterday because it's a gratitude thing. It can happen quickly too. I mean, you just cruising along, and
we had quite a few moments in the last, let's say, 24 hours where we've just kind of been like, that could have been it. That could have been it. And again, I don't want to over dramatize it compared to people who have lost someone in a accident or lost their physical well-being or health in an accident. We're fortunate there that we know that did not happen to us. And yet from a kind of almost existential thinking about the impermanence of things in life and everything, it's a story now that's like, gosh, that was really sudden and bad and reminds you of things you maybe take for granted and things you're not even thinking about. And even as much as I talk about grief or loss or death or dying, we all kind of catch ourselves in these moments where we're still just living like we're going to live forever. And so those reminders that that's not the case, sometimes they can come in a really meaningful, beautiful, spiritual way. And sometimes they are, getting T-boned on Easter on a hit and run and just being like, whoa, man, like we do not have control. And that's, I mean, it's something, you and I were talking about how we're going to get into the importance of storytelling and kind of the nuance of storytelling. One of the few things that helps us feel like we can make any sense of how chaotic things are is stories.
Yeah.
We are storytellers, and you and I are both storytellers in our own right. I'm very proud of the fact that I can tell a story. And
you're very gifted at and believe it or not, I mean, in off air, you can be real funny, but I know you want to be serious.
People here don't know it. Yeah.
Very serious on this podcast, but some of you can tell let me tell you, and you get this from your dad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had the privilege to go to last couple of years. We'll go down to Table Rock Lake together. Your family's included, Ashley and I and Charlie, like we're family, and 1,000 thank yous isn't enough. But to sit around that picnic table that we all sit around, and if you or your dad are telling a story, it's the gift of the evening. You guys are very gifted storytellers. Appropriate amounts of humor. You can make people cry on fucking whim, depending on the nature of the story. But very gifted storytellers.
My dad's a wonderful storyteller and a very. I mean, part of, it's part of the way that he had talked to me, and I'm sure he would deny this conversation just in the name of his undying humility. But just talked about, even when I was growing up, my dad was somebody that said, you gotta be able to tell a story, because that's how you get people interested in you, is being able to tell a story, being able to talk about yourself in a way that people think is interesting and relatable. And, I watched a lot of stand-up comedy with my dad growing up, and, the world, I mean, from you name it, from Robin Williams to Gallagher.
I was going to ask if he had any favorites.
Like we watched pretty much everybody, and just that ability to craft a story, and my grandpa was good at it too. My dad's dad was good, as just like very blue collar. Your stories are what you got, and then as I've come into, years of being a therapist, it's similar. I sit with people and get to hear stories and get to watch as we kind of craft stories, like as you're figuring out, even as stories change, but we are the storytelling animal, like we
Nice.
put these narratives together, we put these stories together, we put our life stories together. A story that carried you through 10 years might not carry you anymore. And so then you got a different version of that story. This is something in therapy that might happen where somebody says, oh, here's all these, I always thought I grew up A, B, and C, and it turns out it was D, E, and F. And now you got to work with that whole new story. But no matter what, we work in story, we work in narrative. That's just kind of the way we are as a species.
It's to no surprise probably that you're to people that are listening that your dad's probably favorite activity when we're vacationing in Table Rock, Branson area is to go to Silver Dollar City and watch the blacksmith. It's a form of storytelling. These blacksmiths talking about, I mean, they're literally sharpening steel and telling a story. Which is why I probably asked that nice clerk that one time about his finger.
He did lose a finger, yeah.
I asked him, how'd you lose that finger?
There is a real...
Gave me the story.
He did. He was ready. I mean, he's like, it's not that cool. And I'm like, trust me, bro. It's going to be cool. You lost your finger.
Right.
Like, it's going to be a good story. Like, But I would say, my dad is... my dad is a very... blue collar guy, and I frequently describe him as being very wise. My dad has a lot of wisdom to him, this kind of like pragmatic wisdom where he sees right to kind of an easy center of something, right? He's not, it's very natural. My dad will say something like, he reads a headline that says that the FCC received 1,500 complaints about the Super Bowl halftime show.
Right.
And he immediately goes, well, don't 200 million people watch the Super Bowl? Why are 1,500 of them such a big deal, right? That is the practical wisdom that you would want from that like, yeah, you are correct. If 1,500 out of 200 million people dislike something, that's like a solid statistic. We would all shoot for those odds. And so he has that immediate kind of practical wisdom, but he also has what I would say is a trait of a lot of very thoughtful, emotionally intelligent people, which is he has a very humble sentimentality to him. He understands the importance of story, memory, relationship. He understands that there are a lot of fleeting moments in this life that you don't want to just let pass by without having a story about them. You mentioned Silver Dollar City, my dad has a strong memory of going on a trip, with his dad. In their adulthood, I'm sure grandpa would have been in his 70s in this trip, and him and dad stood and watched the blacksmith at Silver Dollar City. And dad likes to go and stand and watch the blacksmith at Silver Dollar City because he stood there with his dad. Like, that kind of just very present sentimentality is something that a lot of us end up really searching for in story, right? Like we have these things where we want to be able to feel present as a memory is being formed or as a story is kind of unfolding. And when we're like overwhelmed or anxious, or we're moving in a million different directions at a time, or maybe like really truly suffering, it's harder for stories to form in some ways that can be very settling for us, you know? So my dad is where I learned how to kind of grab a singular kind of grain of sand out of a moment and just turn that into a story, you know, these single moments. And he's just very good at that.
He also wants to hear your story. Like he'll ask me or my wife or even Charlie, our son, questions that people, he doesn't just small talk you. If he asks you, hey, so what do you do at your? He wants to know what you do at your job, and not are you a salesman? Like, what do you sell? How does that work? He's really interested, and I think that goes right along with storytelling and caring about the details,
because that's what relationships are. These stories,
sure.
You know, our relationships include a lot of that storytelling too, right? If you think about of all the different pieces of, let's say, yesterday's car wreck, I wouldn't want to neglect the part of the story where in the middle of it, in total chaos, a friend shows up to pick us up.
Oh,
right? Like I don't want to neglect that part of the story, right? If the story is only for posterity's sake, if the only version of that story is somebody doing A, B, or C hit us and could have killed us and all that, right? Like, I mean, that is a version of that story.
Sure.
And if I need that anger at any given point, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But as I'm trying to create an actual narrative to make sense of something that I don't have any control over, I don't want to get more controlling with my anger. I want to get more open to what I don't have control over with these anchor points. Like, well, we were okay. Panov showed up. We didn't even ask him. Panov showed up and we didn't even ask him, and somebody else was on the phone that would have come to pick us up.
Right.
And, you know,
who showed up later in the night to check on you.
You know, like you want to be able, but like the only time that we can really get those stories crystallized, especially if something like overwhelming or difficult has happened, is safety. Is like these spaces where we share a story or tell a story. You know, Holly is trained in critical incident debriefing. So, you know, they work with like first responders and stuff when something bad happens.
Oh, really? Okay.
You can get everybody
unpack that.
Yeah, you get everybody together right away to be like, hey, we need to debrief what just happened, because there's a lot out there to support that if somebody who is witness to or involved in something very traumatic, if they are able to debrief that incident proximal to the incident very quickly, that it is less likely that person would develop post-traumatic stress from that process. And that's the nature of that storytelling.
Interesting. I didn't know that. That's wild.
Yeah. And so, Holly got trained in it when she was in Indiana and is on our county's critical incident debrief. We were also just in Indiana, and ours was not a tough trip because we got to see Granny, who is Holly's grandmother, is the greatest
angel
human anyone has ever met, and also a social worker. Shout out to social workers.
Was she the OG social worker?
Oh man, she's
paved the way
a while back for sure. You know, she's in line with what we're talking about.
I got to see Dan Hurley. Fuck.
Beloved Dan Hurley.
You know, let me complain about him for a second. And it is important because I am focusing on the positive of the trip. What a lifetime memory to take my son to.
Charlie had an amazing time.
Right. He loves basketball. He's not as orange and blue as I am.
Sure.
So he actually likes UConn too. So, which I wasn't really allowing out loud at least. But he loves basketball. His YouTube stars were there and got to dunk on him. He had the best time of his life. Great lifelong memories. I'm still struggling with Dan Hurley. After the game, they're trying to interview the freshman from UConn that you couldn't miss. Reminded me of the guy from Blue Chips what was this, Ricky Rowe or something?
Sure.
Just couldn't miss. And they're going to interview him. He's a freshman, and there's Dan Hurley. Right in the camera. Like, give the kid his one shining moment. But that's my trip to Indiana. But the story's going to be there where Charlie and I had this great time. He got dunked on by his YouTube star.
And you made fun of Dan Hurley in a way that the crowd enjoyed.
I did. He doesn't know the words to the national anthem.
That's also part of the story.
And now 70,000 stronger Lucas Oil heard me yell that he doesn't know the words.
See? Stories.
Amen.
Yeah.
How's Granny?
She's amazing. And there is Holly has a couple of relatives, Granny being the top of the mountain, who a big way that they show affection is their very thoughtful and very tender way that they ask for clarification, the way that they ask for more details and how have things been, and craft a question and build a story out in real time.
I love the elderly.
And they're just, Granny is particularly good at that. And so you leave talking to her feeling better, not just because she's like a very warm presence, but because you just get the sense that she was really actually interested in what you had to say the whole time you were there. Mm-hmm. She's not distracted. There's no phone to check, right? She didn't have a phone on her. She doesn't.
She's not watching YouTube shorts.
Yeah, like there isn't anything pulling her attention away from the conversation. And, a lot of us need that kind of thing, because if you've never experienced that kind of interest, you're unlikely to have that kind of interest in yourself, right? It's really, really hard to develop an interest in your own stories, in your own process, if you have never felt interesting to people. It's just like a very lonely kind of thing. It's just because we're so social. It's not even necessarily some only terrible trauma talk. It's also just because we're so social as a species that we get a sense of I from you. Like we get a sense of the kind of the boundaries of who we are as a person through our social interactions, other people's interest in us, really, if we get deep into it, starting in childhood, of course. But
right. I'm thinking it was like it's when I talk about a best shot of dopamine is when somebody is interested in you.
Yeah.
That is so I mean, my unclinical advice out there is we talked a lot on the recording before this tonight with we did a PA, and we talked about service work. We talked a lot about this coincidentally, as we're talking about Granny, John, who was just on, his North Star was his grandma. Helped him really get sober, and he passed away 3 days before his 1 year.
Oh, wow.
And you'll love this, and not to get too far down the rabbit hole, but in Colorado they do this, or California, and I don't know where else, but California said they do this big 1 year get together on people's 1 year sober at Denny's.
Oh, nice.
And I know you love that Denny's.
Denny's.
At 11:30 they start kind of counting down the minutes, and then everybody gets their grand slams. And we were making fun of some guy that he was with, got a Salisbury steak. I said he's probably still chewing that. And you go to Denny's and get a Salisbury steak, you got to go grand slam. But
it was frozen.
Yeah, right.
Before that. So yeah.
People bring you cards, and he said that when she died, the funeral, and they're Jewish, was on the same day out in the East Coast, and he was at this big crossroads. But he said he immediately went to service work and made it out there because they the Jewish customs, you literally bury the person, you're throwing dirt on the casket, and he got a flight right back and made it at 10:45 p.m. to his 1 year party because she was so instrumental in that. And my message here is telling, like, when you show interest in somebody, like she did to him, like Holly's Granny does to you guys, it changes the trajectory of somebody's day, maybe their life, man. Mm-hmm. There's people out there just dying for someone, stranger, to show interest in, not forever. Like, 10 minutes.
Because we live in story, you know, like we live in story, and we live so many, you know, our relationships are going to be marked by the people in our life that say, you know, how's your day? You know, I mean, it's like you do with Charlie, right? Like you're going to have that moment at the end of the day where he doesn't want to talk to you, or Ashley. I mean, you know, like, and it's like, hey, how was your day? Fine. What'd you do? Went to school. What'd you guys do at school? Nothing. Like,
it's
you
like
know,
you're there.
and it's like,
Monday
it's a
to Friday.
great, it's still like, you know, there is the thought, to be real therapist-y about it. The thought is that if you guys did that every day and then had some days where you didn't, it would be very strange.
This fucker, they come home last week and he says, "Oh, great. How was school? Great." Throws his backpack down. I'm going to go upstairs and play 2K. And within 5 minutes of that, I was great. Nothing happened at school today. I get a call from Mr. Hazelton, the principal,
Nice.
that Charlie and Mason were in the bathroom, and somebody red pinned the wall because they pencil erases.
That's a story that is the principal's to tell, maybe. Yeah. It's that the scene in Outside Providence or whatever with Alec Baldwin where he just yells at this kid and he's like, "Where are you going?" "Out." "When you coming back?" "Later." "Who you going with?" "Friends." See, was that so hard? Like, it's those conversations where, you know, it's the absence of interest, the absence of being asked your story is what really feels so heavy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's, there is so much to, I mean, if we stay on the topic of somebody like Granny or my grandma, my mom's mom was somebody that I know had an interest in me, was just, you know, was just,
We still talk about that to this day.
Yeah. You know, and I really, you know, enjoy reflecting on just like that really simple interest, you know, because I was a kid, right? And it's when we're building out a lot of stories, one of the things that happens if you're not careful, right, is you can start to believe some pretty nasty stories about yourself.
Nasty ones, man.
You know, and
they come from within.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, calls coming from inside the house, you know, and so it can be very difficult to organize even like a simple neutral story about yourself. Even well, I guess I was just being a human being doing human being stuff becomes really, really tough, right? Like that, to be repetitive in the world of self-compassion. You know, Kristen Neff talks about one of the steps in self-compassion is common humanity, is taking a moment to realize that whatever you're doing, human beings do. And as silly and simple as that sounds, she makes a very solid argument, which is when we are stuck in a rough story about ourselves, we have a tendency to think that we are particularly bad, right? I am particularly bad compared to other people. And so in self-compassion, we work on that story of, well, hold on. Even if this is not your favorite story about yourself, even if this is weighted down by regret, if this is carrying on the generational family curse of things that have happened to people in your lineage, if this is a terrible, selfish mistake, you're not allowed to say that these are selfish, terrible mistakes that no other human being has made, right? Like, we have to take a minute to start to go into common humanity. So that way, when we start to tell this story, we can tell the story as a human, not as some outlier human that is undeserving of the affection and attention of other people. Because once we really get bogged down in a story that is really bad, that there is just something inherently wrong with me, we have a hard time getting out of that. That's tough to get.
Quicksand, man.
It's tough to get from negative to neutral, much less like negative to affectionate.
God,
you know, and
it's like a broken record that continues to, you know. And then I think of somebody coming around and showing that interest in your story being one of the only things that could maybe pull you up to that neutral or beyond when you're stuck in that loop, that internal loop.
To go to my dad again. So my dad worked for the phone company for a while and ran like a call center, way back, when everything was somebody's going to answer the phone on the other side. Right? He ran a call center, and I have the same name as my dad.
I've had some arguments with that automated press 1, press 2.
Dad was running the real show and involved there, and
people long for that.
I have the same exact name as my dad, and so a handful of times over the course of my life, I have been stopped by somebody saying, like, "Do you know Charlie Frankie?" Just because that's my name too, right? And so of course I have the honor of saying, like, "Yeah, it's my dad. Yeah, it's my dad." And they were people that worked with him, and he's universally beloved by people that worked with him because, and it's all ways that we're talking about. And he would hate the idea that I'm giving him this credit because he's got to think of kind of like a way to still be, just like humble about it. But it's mostly that they were
He'll downplay the shit on
my God,
too.
yeah. They were all people that felt like Dad was always looking out for them,
right?
Was always concerned for them. People that followed him a lot of different places, from East St. Louis to Springfield, Illinois, like people that went wherever he went, people that he's got a couple of people that I know carpooled with him 90 minutes each way.
Wow.
When they were very actively going through something difficult in their life, and he was their best friend in it. Because for 3 hours a day, he listened to their stories.
Man.
And he would never say he did that. He would
I can hear him
doing this, doing that, but it's all these stories that, like, if we got stories, we need to tell our stories, and if our stories are very small, right? Well, what's this? How is there such thing as a small story?
There are so many people that, in fact, nobody's argued me in this when I've told them, or we've talked about lost grandparents that are no longer with us, because everybody seems to have a very similar story about one of their grandparents, or if not all of them or both of them, how many they have. My grandpa Mike, it used to be don't get stuck after dinner sitting next to him on the couch because you're in for a long story.
Sounds great.
And
don't threaten me with a good time.
What I would do now, right, to just hear one more long, like you and us kids would be like, "Oh, Grandpa's gonna lock you in."
Sure.
And there's no exit. So, and we used to kind of jab at it in a loving way, avoid it, and whether it was about the war or about a TV show or about, he was the proudest iron worker I've ever met, about something that happened on a job site. And what I would do to go back and saddle up for one of his long stories. And towards the end there, he died of a rare form of colon cancer, and I grieved it hard. Anticipatory. You've taught me about anticipatory grief, and was really drinking a lot. It was right in the middle of my 20s, early 20s, doing a lot of cocaine so I could drink more. Coming back from college in Champaign to help take him to his oncology appointment at Siteman. Drink as soon as we got done. It all away, but I would stand, and Siteman was new in 2007. I think it was a newer facility, and they were building out his window of his floor where he would do a lot of his appointments. They were building a new building, and he would stand out there and watch. We call it he's watching him build his building. And
sure.
He would critique a little bit of the laborers, the new aged iron workers. Weren't they didn't have a harness back in his day?
Sure, right? Great. What a terrible idea.
Sure,
it's like the helmet ruined football.
Right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They didn't have to go. They didn't go all the way down to eat lunch. They just sat there on the beam, dangling, eating their snack. But he would watch it and just tell these stories, and he knew I was close to the end, and I really think it was some of the going through all the pain of colon cancer treatment. I mean, just all the invasion, all of it. he would do that again if he could tell me these stories. He loved it. He fucking loved it.
Yeah.
God, I'm getting emotional, man.
We just need these stories. That's what I mean with there's no such thing as a small story. Like if either you or I go home tonight, we're fortunate enough to go home to someone who will just listen to our day. Because of course
I'll be sleeping.
Well, fair. But
we don't past our bedtime.
We don't have if you have anyone close to you, has nothing to do with just like a partner, but partner, best friend, relative that you're close to, whatever. The people that you see the most, you don't have any more big stories for them.
Right.
I don't have I'm not going to go home and tell Holly a brand new large story I haven't thought of from a pivotal point in my life.
She's read your journal.
Yeah. And so there would be very little that's not what stories are really for. Like stories are more rooted in the idea of we like to tell stories. We like to share what it's like to be us. We need that. We need that to feel seen. I sit, like I mentioned, like being a therapist, there's an aspect of therapy that is an almost constant appreciation for the opportunity to hear stories. And it's not for the spectacular, right? It's not go into your therapist and you say, you better have had something wild happen in the last 7 days. It's no.
Yeah. And not every thing's a Game 7 overtime winner.
No.
Or a David Freese Game 6 home run.
Yeah. It's the opportunity of knowing that if you're sitting with me, I'm interested. Mm-hmm. You're telling a story. I'm interested. I want the chance to hear it. I want the chance to show you that I care about it. I want the chance to say parts of it back to you so that you know that I'm really paying attention and that I'm really in it. And I want that in my life too. I want to, I get the same sense from Dr. Jill. I get the fact of thinking about our day to day as filled with stories that are allowed to be interesting. Where people get really caught up sometimes is they think that this is almost like a form of self-centeredness to care so much about your stories. And it's like, no, you're in your head all day. You have a relationship with yourself all day.
Oh boy.
So no matter what, you're building experiences all day, every day. Your mind is cleaning some of those experiences up at night while you're sleeping. It's trying to organize things the best it can. And so no matter what, you're compiling stories. And so it's not some kind of like narcissism machine to just be wanting to tell your story or to be told that your story is always important. Like your story is always important because human stories are important. Because it's how we operate. It's how we make sense. It's how we figure out our own experience. It's how we do our kind of like sample size of one research on what we're going to care about or what we're going to do next.
It's not to always try to shift gears to the recovery side, but that's so important to this line of work. It's why the flagship quote unquote parent app podcast is just people coming on, sharing their personal stories, their testimonies. And I'm telling you, there's no greater gift and privilege than having someone willing to come on, share it, because they know it. Everybody says the same thing, and they're not all scheming behind the scenes. That if it helps one person, that's why they want to share, and make people feel less alone and more relatable, which can be life-saving. So we do it here. We do it at Underground. It's the most people this day. It's not when I get up and talk 10 to 15 minutes about, some Jesus transformation shit or higher power spirituality, or anything about myself. It's about the personal story time that really when a mom picks this podcast or Underground to go and tell strangers, some she sees or some that she's speaking into a microphone about her hardest, darkest day, is a gift and a privilege. And it's the most powerful part of the evenings for sure, especially on Wednesday nights. So much so that Easter Sunday yesterday, the gathering, the church we go to, that's rather large if you count the number of people. They have 5 sites, but on Easter Sunday they meet as one. We meet at one site, 2 different services. So at the factory, filled up the factory in Chesterfield twice, and they had 2 moms that are part of Underground. One has lost a son. Jordan's Jump Starts right here behind me on the wall. That's her son, Jordan. Her name is Becky. And the other one, Tennille, whose episode just dropped, whose son is 6 months clean and sober down in Florida, and shared their stories and that's the most impactful part of Easter, is people hearing people's stories of tragedy, trauma, and triumph.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thought of, we'll use some of the big dogs like Jesus and the Buddha. Almost every great spiritual teacher or religious teacher taught in story.
Yeah, right.
It's hard to argue.
Samaritan.
Yeah, it's hard to argue how good Jesus was in a pretty condensed period of time that we know of, that he taught in parable.
Right.
Because if he were to, let's say, break down some religious tenets, some more academic, right? He's clearly a very bright religious teacher. You are going to catch some people with the kind of the academic knowledge of if he's kind of teaching the tenets of Judaism and breaking down the what we would say the Old Testament. Do you know
who he would have lost?
He's bright.
This boy right here.
But he taught in parable.
God bless.
He taught in parable.
Because I understand the old Good Samaritan story.
Yeah. I mean, prodigal son, all of it. Good stuff.
Some good ones.
They say in Buddhism, they say that the Buddha had 84,000 teachings. There's tons of reasons why that would be, but there's so many stories, right? And that's what we remember. There's classic books. I mean, in like Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, it's a collection of stories. There's always going to be some kind of story in Buddhism that is student goes to his teacher, or 2 monks, or a woman goes to the Buddha, or
you've shared a lot of them on this podcast. Or
it's one of the best. If you really, a master class in storytelling from a religious point of view is to look at like Jack Kornfield, who's a Buddhist teacher. Like Kornfield is part of a core group of Western teachers, because Western Buddhism is not a particularly old concept.
The name sounds West. If you said Jack Kornfield, and I never would have guessed he was a Buddhist.
Yeah, well, there is a group of core Western teachers in Buddhism that are all Jewish. It was Jack Kornfield, Sharon Salzberg, Joseph.
I'm a great stereotyper, by the way.
Joseph Goldstein and Mark Epstein.
No relation.
Not an exhaustive list, but some of my absolute favorites. But one of the things that really sets Kornfield apart, and one of the other kind of generous things, is that Kornfield has put an incredible amount of teaching and material out in podcast form and old re-released recordings of him and stuff. He almost exclusively teaches in story. There is so much to be said to say, well, tonight we're going to talk about blank, and people go, oh, I'm interested in that. Tonight we're going to talk about addiction, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm interested in addiction. I know we could listen to that. And then there's a space for something like, well, methamphetamine hijacks your prefrontal cortex. And when you're right, there's a space for that, right? People are interested in things like brain science and everything. But when we get into, well, tonight we're going to talk about addiction, and we are going to talk to a human being who has been impacted by addiction and have them talk about what it was like to be them being impacted by addiction. Inevitably, as humans, we go, that's a person. I'm one of those.
Right.
I should see what these stories are about. And it's how we make sense of the world, right?
Yeah.
Look at the way that we project, right? Like whenever we see an animal behaving a certain way, right? We presume its feelings, right? I can be looking out the back window of my office and just be like, oh, I made the squirrels mad today. I didn't put the cat food out until 4:30, right? I'm seeing them run around.
You never loved Gloria enough.
I know. Yeah. We just kind of presume all these stories, not because we are awful, egocentric monsters, but because it's how we make sense of the world. We make sense of the world through story. And so that's not just making sense. It's also these tellings, right? It's we become dependent on people willing to tell their stories, right? Like we're talking about needing to be heard, but we're also very dependent on needing the sharers, right?
Yeah.
Needing the people who will talk, who will tell a story, because inevitably somebody tells a story, somebody else is going to be like, damn, that could be my story.
It's like a form of relatability. Like and you feel less isolated.
Yes. Right? It's this call for connection that is just so just in us, and it's such a cool thing, right? If you think about like I said, going back to religion, you think of any spiritual teacher that's just teaching in these stories, and then you kind of perk up, right? Like a good storyteller gets going.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, here we go. And Jack Kornfield is definitely like that. There's a therapist named Terry Real that wrote a book called Us. And he wrote a book called I Don't Want to Talk About It, about men's depression.
Tell me about it.
And Terry Real, if you listen to him get interviewed, one of the best things about him being interviewed are these really cute moments where he goes, can I tell a story real quick? And he's always going to do it, right? He's always going to be like, I love stories. Can I tell a story real quick? And it is a great teaching style, right? Like, of course, he's about to share something that is 40 plus years of being a psychotherapist, multiple books, an understanding of attachment to the brain, the body, the nervous system, trauma, psychodynamics, family systems, right? It's an overlap of years and years and years of knowledge that he's going to help you make sense of it in the primary way that we make sense of things, which is, can I tell you a story?
He's going to give you the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah. Can I tell you a story? And that's, and we just wake up with that, most of us, right? And if anybody were listening to this and say like, I couldn't care less about people's stories, that's okay. You're a person too. You're not the only one that feels that way. Like, I just think that it's bringing it to recovery. The world of recovery is dependent on story, and it's not necessarily dependent on story that you only tell verbally, right? You might write it down, you might play it in a song, you might write it as a poem,
paint it.
But yeah, you can, any way that you can think of. I would like to share a representation of my experience. Is anybody interested?
I mean, it's a part of the step work. I mean, you go to a meeting, there's usually a reading, right? But then you always have somebody share, and it's a good balance. The reading is important. I'm not minimizing the importance of whatever is chosen to be read that night. It's important in literal and probably figurative ways. But then somebody shares, and that's powerful. I mean, we have speakers every other Friday night here to the alumni group. We talked about underground. You and people go share in meetings, not even, and they're invited to not even in their home group type meetings, into other meetings, because you go share with strangers. I've been asked to speak on multiple occasions of places that I don't frequent. I remember being asked to share my story to a group of church elders at a church I don't go to, that a guy I know at our church, his father runs like community outreach at his small church in some town in Missouri, and they were talking about addiction. They asked me to go speak, and it's taught in recovery. You say yes to that.
Right.
And it's because of it's not about necessarily me as much as I sometimes like it. I mean,
you're capable. You're human.
I'm a human too. I'm a person too. But you say yes to those opportunities because it really, I mean, it's a big ecosystem of storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, to go even full circle with it, a lot of it is a craft, right? Like, I mean, like storytelling and even the way that we build relationship or that we build our own authentic self and we make sense of our stories, right? We're constantly in kind of the craft of storytelling. We're constantly trying to figure out what we want to share, what is most authentic to us in the moment, even stuff that maybe we don't tell in a story anymore, not because we're being dishonest, but because it's just not really representative of where we're at anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's okay to share a story and know, gosh, you know, the first couple of years that I would talk about this stuff, I always focused on blank, but I don't really focus on that anymore. I more think about this. And, you know, that process of giving yourself permission to be flexible enough to have multiple stories and multiple versions of it. You know, the pressure to have one version of a story that never changes is the same as the pressure to think that we are a finished product. Where as if a story that if I told a story when I was 28 years old about when I was 25 and that story is still the same at 44, where have I been?
Right.
You know, what have I been doing all of these years that it's
wild.
the exact same version of a story.
I get told often I'm a work in progress.
Yeah, of course. You better be. You know what? That's the sign of intelligence, knowing how much you don't know.
Sure.
You know, and there's an aspect of that flexibility that has its roots in compassion. That as soon as we are able to kind of grant ourselves the permission structure to look a little deeper at a story, to question something that seemed completely unquestionable before, to even to kind of maybe even cringe a bit at previous versions of stories that we've told and to say, oh man, I don't know that was the one, you know, like now that I know, you know, I wish I knew now. I wish I knew then what I know now.
You're
right?
talking about at that time I went over when I drove out to Freeburg.
Well, that wasn't a good one. Yeah. We have a deeper view of that one for sure.
With our friend Nick Woolery in the lobby at the ice rink.
I miss Nick.
How's it going?
Yeah, I hope great. Nick Woolery scored 5 goals against Bishop de Burgh one time. And so don't say that. It's a beautiful story. A guy that kept his head up and, you know, was always finding open ice. But I mean, you tell those stories if we're going to be embarrassed of certain versions of our stories. You know, I mean, you're talking about recovery. That's the big thing is I think it's very hard for people.
You threw my Rumpelmans out.
Yeah.
When I was 14.
You're welcome.
That story's not changed. You know,
it's changed. And at the time I thought I was doing something good. Now I know it didn't even put a dent in it.
Here we are.
Hamster wheel.
Before we get to recovery, I'm thinking about, you know, I just sat through the Easter story, right? We did it. Churches talk about it every year. It comes out once a year. It's the Christmas stuff. But where you're at, whether it's in a faith journey, a spirituality journey, whatever you're going through in your life, like that story you've heard year over year over year can hit you differently each time you hear it. People can tell it differently. Some way you've never heard of. There was Sunday, excuse me. Matt's message focused on one phrase in Matthew about the women. It was always the fucking women, you know.
Much better than us.
They are. We are the weaker sex.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Ashley said I wouldn't make it an hour as a woman.
No.
1 hour, 60 fucking minutes. She said I'd be toast.
Yeah.
Probably 30, but I think she was being generous with it.
Yeah, she loves you.
But they left the tomb in great fear and great joy. And he focused on, I never heard that before. And he then related it to recovery. He was talking about underground on how both can be true. And, you know, when you have your personal resurrection and, you know, decide to surrender and become a new person in recovery, it is very scary. It's the scariest day of my life, the day I checked into treatment. It still comes up on March 25th on my Facebook memories. God bless those Facebook memories. Talk about some drunk rants. I have to purge them, but I usually screenshot them and send them to you. Hey, look what I said.
We call that the losses as they roll in.
You got it. Yeah. But it was fear and great joy that this life is better. So each time the stories and the text hasn't changed depending on the version you're reading. But like you said, if you're telling a story about when you were 25, when you're 28, and it's still the same at 41 or 42, something's, I don't even think that's possible.
Yeah. Well, there's also something to be real, unfortunately boring about it. All of these stories have always been there, right? Like Christianity doesn't have a monopoly on a resurrection and of figures coming back. All humanity over all history has told stories of creation, of death and rebirth.
Sure. Of
a figure that is half God and half human, of a God having a child with a human mother. Every culture across humanity has told the same stories. It's if you get into it, you start seeing. I mean, there's clearly some changes based on regions and people and time, but there's an example that is kind of a deep cut, but to give a bit of an example to it, in Tibetan Buddhism and some other schools of Buddhism, there's what's called rainbow body. And rainbow body is that when a person dies at such a state of oneness, at such a state of enlightenment.
Okay, I was going to ask you if that's
of enlightenment. Their body just kind of like disappears within a couple of days, is the story, that they just kind of are taken into the color spectrum. It's rainbow body. They just quietly disappear. There's a priest by the name of Francis Tiso, Tiso, who has written an entire book on the overlap between things like rainbow body and the resurrection. That these stories are just always around, right? Like humans have always told the story of this, mostly because we also need some really heavy-handed symbolic imagery in our stories so that we can remember that like all kind of bouncing back is available. Right? That if at the top of the mountain is a figure who dies and comes back, right? We can do, us mere mortals, if you will, we can do all versions of that up to that. Right? We can do
and
all versions of
hope.
Death and rebirth.
Is what it does. It takes a dark or hopeless existence, version, state, and inspires light and hope.
Yeah.
That your low point's not your final point.
And the stories have just always been there. You just start looking around and you're just gonna and it's the same thing that shows up. I mean, this is the same thing that shows up in anywhere from superheroes to every movie you watch to every book you read.
To Tommy Pondo, baby.
Yeah, all these stories start to show up and you go, well, isn't this like this story? Yes. It's not stolen. Right. It's that this is the human experience that over, countless millennia at this point, we have told stories that are similar to the stories everybody else was telling. And especially with nobody even talking about it, right? They weren't sharing these stories, right? You weren't, nobody from 4,000 miles away was running 4,000 miles to tell somebody their stories. Like it just so happens that everybody told the same story, that we have these creation stories and we have these parables and these teachings, and we learn in these stories. We find our kind of symbolic representations of ourselves in these stories because that's what we need, right? You want to be able to see yourself in a story. The Jesuits have a meditation where they will reflect on what it would be like to be present at certain scenes in the Bible. Just like, and so you just kind of reflect on maybe you're just like a person in this story, just like a person in the town when something is happening, right? You're in the temple when Jesus starts to wreck the place, and just like, what are you feeling? And what are you thinking about it? And what are some of the stuff that you have, like the stuff that's coming up for you?
Fuck
right?
that Pontius Pilate.
But like you might
like
have
whoop that ass.
You might have a moment where you start reflecting and be like, gosh, if I were there, I don't know that I'd cause any trouble. You might suddenly realize
we've all had a moment. We've all had our Pontius Pilate moment.
Yeah, you might not have spoken up, right? You might, if the stories throughout Buddhism include
that state trooper fucking got the cheap shot on me in that party at Freeburg.
That story hasn't changed, evidently.
Smashed my face in the car.
That story hasn't changed, evidently.
I had my buddies there.
Some version of that story has changed in terms of he's sober now,
Yeah.
but other than that, we're still working through it.
Right. It's a work in progress.
Yeah. Waves can have that one. But I think that
we swap stories.
Sure. I think that there's a decent amount of need out there to just kind of find spaces where we tell stories, we listen to stories, we relate, we go to the Death Cafe every month. We sit there and stories come up, and it doesn't really. The topic of death is secondary to the stories. It's not always, well, I'm here grieving, or when my so-and-so died, uncle, aunt, grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, partner, it's not just that, right? Like, the reason why a death cafe exists is because talking about death is talking about life, right? That's the whole premise of it, is that the fact that this is impermanent is what makes it life. And so the stories are what kind of flesh that out. Our ability to try to tell a story, repeat a story, have a story feel seen and relatable. We need that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need that.
That's how you start learning as a child. The hungry caterpillar.
Yeah. I mean, we get books out, we get stories out, we get pictures out.
Ugly duckling.
Yeah. We need these
Still
parables.
waiting for me to turn into that swan.
No.
Patience is a virtue.
Yeah, everything's impermanent.
I am looking forward to the summer and sitting around the picnic table, hearing stories from the two Charlie Frankies.
Yeah. One of my favorite.
Maybe I'll join you in one of those pipes.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories from Table Rock is
my business meeting.
Yeah, that is one, but one that's maybe more relevant to this is there's a moment, probably day 5 of our trip last year. We're having our normal great time, and we're sitting around the picnic table, and kind of shooting from the hip. You said something about, you were like, I mean, we could live down here, and wouldn't it be? We could live down here, right? And I said, well, yeah, we could, but you're saying that because we don't let ourselves sit around a picnic table for 3-4 hours at a time with no agenda at any other time in our life.
Right.
It's not that we need Table Rock Lake to do that. It's just that's the only place that we do that.
Right.
The only place that we allow ourselves to have just uninterrupted conversation until we go, time to go to bed, is sitting around a picnic table 1 week a year. And yet that should be a little more available.
Yeah.
But instead, like, we all get caught up in the idea that we should always be making the next story rather than just kind of being in the one that we're in. And it's the ability to be present in the story that we're in, and to be sharing our experience in real time, to be feeling seen by people who are not just going to judge everything or ask every kind of judgmental question, right? Like, having this uninterrupted time to just be a human being living a story is what we need. And so when we have these moments of like, gosh, don't you think we could just like live here? And it's like, well, yeah, we could get a picnic table.
Sure.
You know, I mean, that's all it was.
For those listening, this isn't a 6-star.
It's rustic.
Right. Yeah. It's a cabin.
It's got some rustic aspects to it.
It's beautiful. Absolutely. Heaven on earth.
Yeah.
And it's the people we're with and the picnic. Yeah. It's a picnic table.
But the real connection of it is stories. And I do think that, it's important. This is the kind of topic that we'll bring up a lot because, you know, you're doing something important, which is making sure that PA comes out every week, and that is story, right? I've built my whole life around how much I just care about one story after another, and how much I love hearing story, and I love sitting with story, and I just love people. And I know that what we need are these stories. And so this kind of topic is something that not only is important, but what we really need to be sharing is like, tell stories, like recognize that whatever happened to you today is important. Not necessarily important like today was the best day of your life, or I don't need to placate that way. I just mean like, you know, elaborate. Know that you're a person that's worthy of elaboration, right? Like that's what all the great, like I talk about Carl Jung and all the great therapists always were able to talk about, like, no, let's kind of elaborate, get a little exaggerative, find a deep connection in what it was like to be you today, and see if a story unfolded, because that's so human. You will inevitably be able to find space there. You will find some safety there in that this is what it was like to be you, and you are day-to-day living stories that deserve to be told. And I don't know, hopefully somebody needed to hear that.
Amen.